Happy Friday. So I hope you know that our pledge drive has been underway and is winding down. But if Chalice is important to you, we hope that you've made a pledge commitment of financial donations for the coming fiscal year. They're important to us for our ability to plan for regular church life. So you've received lots of emails about these. Please click one of those links and go ahead and make your pledge commitment. If you have any questions, you can contact me directly. And if you've been pledging and we haven't heard from you, then you'll probably get something in the mail from us next week. I also hope you know that our Return to Center Sundays have been wonderful fun. This Sunday, 2 days from now, is our final special Deluxe Coffee Hour Sunday. We'll be having breakfast burritos, and John Schultz will be our musician. He will be, he'll be part of the Deluxe Coffee Hour afterwards, starting at noon. He'll be playing at noon. Coffee hour starts at 11. So if you haven't been yet, I hope to see you at Chalice, possibly in person on Sunday. Again, you don't have to come to worship in order to come for coffee hour afterwards. And for the rest of this time, which might turn into a little bit of a ramble, a couple of you have asked me this week for advice and tips about exercising. And so I thought I'd spend a little time on that. So if you are someone who likes to exercise and has that as a regular part of your life, this message is probably not for you. But for the rest of us who struggle a little bit, I'm happy to spend a little bit of time talking about this. The reason why this is part of something a minister would talk about, part of church life, we know that like a half an hour of gentle exercise is really each day, most days, is really important for our mood and for energy. And particularly as we're going to be foggy, confused, and overwhelmed coming, post-vaccine, hopefully post-pandemic, for a long time. We're going to need to be picking ourselves back up and working to regain our lives the way they were before the pandemic. So that's why trying to build some regular exercise into your day can be really important all of the time, and then especially in the months to come. And for those of us who don't love exercising, it's a real challenge. So someone this week, I mentioned, that I wanted to take a walk, but it was sometimes hard to get going. And they were really grateful to hear me say that. So maybe in my emphasis on taking the daily walk, I've lost my confession that can be hard to do that when you feel perfectly comfortable and happy at home. So I want to talk about habits. I've preached on this topic. I've also preached on dopamine, which is another big piece of this puzzle. And I'll try to be somewhat succinct. But most of what I know and think about habit comes from a book called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And a lot of that information comes from businesses and corporations who spent a lot of money learning about people's habits because they want to sell us things. So sometimes that's where the best research is coming from, because that's who has money to spend learning about these things. And the reason I'm going to talk about habit in terms of exercise is because most of us want to build the habit of exercise. And what habits do is they free up our brains. As we talked about at the beginning of the pandemic, when you're doing everything for the first time, it takes an awful lot of attention and energy as your brain tries to figure out what we're doing. And the healthy habits that we can cultivate in our lives take up a lot less brain energy. Habits get handled in a different way in the brain, and they don't take up the same amount of focus and energy. So the more we can build healthy habits, the stronger roles those can play in our lives. So the structure of a habit, as described in this book, is that there's a cue, so something that triggers us to start doing something. So I'm going to use as a basic sample brushing our teeth at night. And so for most of us, the cue is that it's nighttime or it's bedtime. Maybe for some of you, the cue is that it's after dinner. Maybe if you brush your teeth in the morning, the cue is that it's morning and you're getting up. So there's something that triggers the behavior. There's the behavior, brushing our teeth. And then there's the reward. And rewards don't have to be huge, $1 million checks and balloons out of the ceiling. So think of what the reward is for brushing your teeth. You have the satisfaction of knowing you're taking care of yourself, better checkups at the dentist, longer life for the teeth in your mouth, those kinds of things. Such a reward that we don't even usually think about it. But of course, that's why we're brushing our teeth. So that's a very simple example. And so, exercise can be a lot harder. I think one of the hardest things for me has been finding the cue. And, in 30 years of adult life, I've had times that I exercised very regularly and times that it was more of a struggle. So I have a lot of different times I can look back on and think about, well, why did this work then? What was the habit? And what parts of it were strong? So, for example, there was a window of time in my life when I was listening to the Harry Potter books on audio, and I only listened to them when I was at the gym. And so that became the motivation. I wanted to see, what was going to happen next. I've had cues. I think exercising with friends, taking a walk with a friend is a great reinforcer. So that's both the cue, right? We set a time, my friend is waiting, and it's the reward. I get to spend time with a friend. And I've had times when I was trying to exercise daily, and I learned that having a day with very little going on, like not a lot of distractions, no meetings, those became the hardest days to exercise because there was nothing to trigger that action. And so I just keep thinking like, well, I'll do it later. Well, I'll do it later. I'll do it before dinner. I'll go after dinner. So there was sort of nothing making that happen. So I think it's worth time to think about successful habits you've cultivated and think about this structure, cue, behavior, and reward, and learn from them, learn what works well for you. So when I did that recently, I realized that time of day is a pretty good cue for me. A lot of my best habits are because I always do this in the morning or this after lunch or this, I want to get this done before dinner. So that was helpful to know. And then the other thing to think about is what are the barriers to exercising, however you define that for yourself. But what's keeping you? And I know for a lot of you feel like, oh, I just don't want to, or I haven't, we might have self-judgment about that. I'm lazy. I encourage you to really think about what it is. So I'll share that for me, when I thought about it, one of the things that was really keeping me was that I get sweaty when I go for a walk. We have lots of hills in my neighborhood, which is great, but so I get sweaty. So that means that going for a walk, so I'm going to change my clothes to go for the walk. And then I'm going to come home sweaty and I'm going to want to take a shower and then change clothes again. So it wasn't just the half hour of taking the walk, it was kind of all the other stuff around it. And yeah, so that's why I would put it off and not want to do it. I would also add, be aware that overthinking on its own can be its own barrier. So you can hear in some of my storytelling that I start to tell myself, oh, I don't need to do it now. I can go later on, like too much self-talk. And so I've learned to become aware when I'm doing that and just set it aside, just ignore my own self. Like I'm talking myself out of doing it is what's happening. So with all of those things in mind, for me, in my latest attempts to become more of a regular exerciser, I decided what I wanted to do was to exercise first thing in the morning. So remember I said time of day cues have been helpful for me, and that I have this barrier about getting sweaty. So what I do is as soon as I get up, I put on my walking clothes, I go for a walk before I've eaten breakfast, and it's great to get some sunshine at that time of day too. And then when I come home sweaty, well, then if I'm taking a shower and changing my clothes, it's really still just part of like getting up in the morning. And And so that's actually been, and then eating breakfast becomes part of the reward. Like, I love my breakfast. I have eggs. So, I get to come home and enjoy the deliciousness of breakfast and my first caffeine of the day. And all of that. And it feels so good to get the exercise over with. That's another reward. Like, oh, now I don't have to think about it for the rest of the day. As you might imagine, one of the barriers is when I wake up and I don't quite feel ready to get up. So, I don't want to push off my breakfast and those things for too long. And so there are some mornings that I decide to stay in bed an extra half hour, and that, getting some more rest feels like the higher priority. But, the more I'm going for the walk, the more that becomes its own reward, and it does start to become a habit. So that's what's working for me right now, just as an example of working with these ideas of cue, behavior, and reward. So yeah, and it can be hard to do these things where the rewards feel more intangible. So I know I talked with someone this week who said, you do feel good right away when you go for a walk. But that's not always true for everybody. Sometimes we know that exercise is good for us, but those rewards can feel kind of far off and mysterious. And, we all know that exercise is important, not just for our bodies, but our brains, right? It really helps not just with mental health, but with, there's evidence that it helps keep our minds sharp and those kinds of things. So I just wanted to say some encouraging words. I think another part of it is not to beat yourself up. So I'm not going for a walk every single day. I think this week I've made it 3 times, which is like really good for me right now. I would love to get it even more consistent than that. But I think part of it is to feel good when I've done it and not to berate myself too much when I haven't. So that's part of it. Try not to think of it as all or nothing. Like, if I could wave a wand, it would be to have a neighbor friend to go for a walk with. And I don't know my neighbors that well yet. Plus my schedule isn't defined enough to be able to commit to that every day. But I did have a couple of years where in the past when I went for a walk with a neighbor, and that was great. To visit with someone for half an hour went by like that. Really helped get me out of bed in the morning. We had an agreement that if we weren't going to be there, we wouldn't tell the person. So you'd go and you'd stand on the corner and you'd wait a little bit. And if they weren't there, then you went without them, or maybe swung by their house just to hang outside for a minute. But that helped us get us up. Whereas if you told the person, hey, I'm not going to walk tomorrow, then, the other person would stay in bed. Because once you're dressed and out the door, like, that's the hard part. So, find a buddy, find someone maybe you want to check in with about this. If you want to be my exercise buddy and we can send each other emails, I'm happy to have a little email, and I'll tell you I went for my walk this morning, and you can tell me if you did what you want to do. So all of the things we can do to encourage each other, because, life is hard enough, and if a little bit of exercise helps lighten our moods, then that's worth pursuing. So I hope this is helpful to any of you who welcome some encouragement. And, love and blessings to each of you. I hope it's going okay. I hope you're enjoying the weather. Whatever's going on in your life, I hope you have support and know that you are loved and cared for. So I hope to see you soon. Take care.